which we have only small glimpses of. And crucially, in both the first, the drones, and the last case, cyber war, the United States President has taken to himself the powers to declare preemptive war. This is against the US Constitution, and constitutional lawyers have written yards and yards on this subject. Again, I say, kind of, where is the outrage on all this? Unfortunately, what we've got into is a new norm in which these things are taken for granted. And the people responsible for all this, these Western leaders, are extremely far away from being done for war crimes as they should be. Now, underlying all these swathes of war, I just want to mention two particular themes that I think are crucial. One is Palestine, with the rapidly deteriorating political and economic and social situation. And the second is Guantanamo Bay, where you have 177 men held illegally outside the Geneva Conventions. The very large majority of them have been cleared by the largest possible task force of intelligence people, but they still haven't been released. And those people are likely to be held forever. It's unthinkable, but it's true. But of course, luckily, we're not all numb, or we wouldn't be standing here on a night when we could be sitting at home and chatting or playing cards or whatever we do. And we all do amazing things, and I know you do many things in Frome, but I just want to mention two things in particular. The extraordinary march that we had in one of the greatest rainstorms I've ever experienced in London after the last attack and assassination in Gaza was an extraordinary mobilization of British people. And the second is just to mention those few stalwarts who still walk around in orange suits talking about Guantanamo Bay and campaigning for Shaka Ahmed, the last person from Britain still held there. And hats off to everybody who keeps going. But I also want to say that all our anti-war activities, whatever they are incredibly important. And what they show is that the culture of resistance is extremely wide. And all the different things that we do is part of a great continuum in the world of resistance against the lies and the propaganda of the powerful. And of course we've had one massive success, which is that Tony Blair can no longer show his face in public in Britain, except in very, very carefully guarded situations where the likes of us will not be there, making it impossible for him to enter. And I think this is a great triumph. And I want to turn very briefly to a different aspect, both of the 10 years of the war on terror and lies and propaganda. A very long time ago, I used to be a war reporter in Vietnam, and I subsequently became one in Africa. And what I discovered over the years of doing mostly obscure wars were my speciality, was that the way to do it was to find a small corner and really know that corner. And from that, you get the big picture. From the micro, you get the big picture. And when it came to the war on terror, I didn't really, at the beginning, I realized what I was doing. But of course, like everybody, I wanted to understand the war on terror. And it wasn't somewhere where I couldn't go to destroyed villages and besieged cities and refugee camps. So what I did was I stayed here. And what I found in London, and it was completely by chance, one thing led to another, but I ended up, and this is what my book is about, I ended up with a world of women. Some of them were British, some of them were from Africa and various other countries in the Middle East. And what they all had in common was that their husbands were, and in one case sadly still are, in Guantanamo Bay. Or they were in that group that were picked up, of Muslim men, picked up and put in Belmarsh with no charges immediately after 9/11, when David Blunkett was the Liberal Home Secretary at the the time. Those men were kept in Belmarsh without trial for 2 years until the House of Lords demanded they be released, and they were placed in this Orwellian situation of house arrest. Nobody can visit you unless the Home Secretary agrees. You are confined to that house, and you become a different kind of prisoner, and your wife and your children were also prisoners. And through a long story, I met one, and then I met another, and I met another. And interestingly, some of the men asked me to visit their wives because they were so isolated. And so for the last 10 years, that's really what I've been doing. And I have found not only a world of the most horrible, systematic, small-minded cruelty by people from our society, from the highest levels to the lowest. And at the same time, I've found completely wonderful British people who wanted to try to insert themselves into little bits of this horrible, horrible situation. And I've also found the most amazingly resilient, warm women. And it won't surprise any of you, I think, if I tell you that an awful lot of them are Palestinian, and the most resilient are Palestinian. And through that microcosm of the people that I know and have known in a very intimate way, I think that I've got a feel of the evil that is the war on terror. And that's what I've tried to write about. But I assure you it's not a gloomy book, because the women are not at all gloomy. And I just suppose I want to end by saying that whatever it is that we do to puncture the sanctimonious lies of our Foreign Secretary, among others, and all those politicians who jump on the bandwagon of wanting to demonize people like the ones that I now know, everything we can do to puncture those people's feeling that they can get away with it is a tremendous plus for what I call the kind of worldwide resistance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Victoria. That was really brilliant. Thank you. And next we have Professor David Miller. David lectures in sociology at Bath University. He is co-founder of the website and organisation called Spinwatch, which monitors media bias, lobbying and political corruption. He's also given advice to, as an expert, he's given expert testimony at terrorism-related trials in the US, UK and Australia. And he's an author of many books, and he's co-author of 2 which will be signing later on this evening. So, Professor Miller.
Thank you. I want to start by disagreeing with Victoria slightly. I want to suggest that lots of the public in this country aren't convinced sometimes by the lies that are told, and that the problem in our society is not that people believe the lies, but that there is no method and no means and nowhere to go from dissent and disbelief to change. And I think that's true not just in relation to the war, but in relation to all of the society, in relation to the police, in relation to the media, the courts, the MPs, the House of Lords. Every part of our society is mired in corruption, and we all know it. There's a story yesterday in the press, on television, about the National Health Service and how there was a disgraceful incident in Stafford where people were being treated appallingly in the hospitals. And I sat listening to that and I thought, I can see the people now, the lobbyists in London, thinking, yes, this is a good story, because that means that we can say that the problem with the NHS is in the public sector and we need more privatisation.
Could you speak a bit louder?
I'm sorry, I was trying. And so they say, I can see them saying, we will need more privatisation. Actually, of course, the problem with the NHS is the marketisation, is the increasing role of the private sector in the NHS. And we all know this. We all know that the police were corrupt in relation to Levinson and cooperated with the News of the World. We all know that the MPs took far too many expenses and were corrupt, were lying and cheating and stealing from public purse. We all know that lobbyists are able to gain favours from the House of Lords, from ministers. We know of this, but there's nothing that we can do about it because our system is so corrupt that there are no meaningful democratic processes left for us to change things apart from to go out in the streets as we did on the 15th of February 2003 and the processes of getting involved in what Victoria rightly calls the worldwide resistance. The difficulty is not that we have been fooled into believing the lies. The difficulty is that our system is so corrupt, so sclerotic that there is nothing that we can do about it beyond taking direct political action. And I'm afraid that's what we have to do. So I want to give you that context, then come back to the war on terror. I'm just going to talk a little bit about one aspect of the war on terror. I brought with me some PowerPoint slides, but via the majesty which is Microsoft, I'm unable to use a PowerPoint from my Mac. So I had far too many slides anyhow. So what I was going to talk about, and I can talk about some of this a little bit later, I was going to talk about 3 ways in which we misunderstand terrorism. When I use the phrase misunderstanding the terrorist threat, I don't really mean misunderstanding the terrorist threat. I mean that we're being misinformed about the terrorist threat. So I'm being slightly ironic, I think that's allowed to now again. And I think there's 3 key ways in which we're misinformed and misunderstand about the terrorist threat. One of those ways is that there are a panoply of experts who come on the news to tell us about terrorists. And largely what they say to us is either in line with official views or is just madness which they've made up in their bedrooms, sometimes literally.